Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And the word says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I search with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man, to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it. And behold, all was vanity, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. The word of the Lord.
We're here in chapter 2. The technical name for what Solomon is describing is a Greek word called Epicureanism. So you might happen to know what the word Epicureanism means, besides me. Epicureanism, the pursuit of pleasure unrestrained. Another way for Epicureanism to be expressed in culture, you'll see this, is let us eat, drink, and be, for tomorrow we all will die. That's Epicureanism. There's no consequences for my behavior, so I can behave however I want. Now, this aligns great with nihilism, with materialism, with atheism. Why? Because in all of those views, pragmatism to a point, all those views, there is no ultimate end for mankind other than to die. Solomon is arguing against that argument because he constantly keeps referring it to the word vanity. Now again, to help you out, is he talking about the Carly Simon song, Don't Make Me Sing It? Yeah. No, please don't sing it. It was bad enough the first time. You sang it last week and it was horrible. I think Clark told me I shorted out his hearing aids. So, right. It means vapor. It means something that is transitory, that the wind blows away. You've all been out on a cold morning and you've gone, and all that steam comes out of your body and then it disappears. It just dissipates upon the wind. That's what Solomon is saying. So Solomon then begins to look at the pursuit of life. And notice the phraseology that he uses through here a lot. He doesn't use work. He uses the word toil. Have you ever used the word toil in a positive sense? When you hear people go, I toil for my wages, it doesn't sound like, man, he loves his job. No, that is not a love my job word. That's a grudging word. I have to toil for everything. I have to labor for everything. So we're going to pick up here in chapter 2. Oh, there it goes. Drives me nuts when it's not set up properly on the screen. And it's my first world problem. And so he pick up here with this concept of vapor. And he's going to talk about pleasure. And he's not going to just simply talk about money and wealth, but also physical pleasure. Matter of fact, there's a lot that he says about that in the Hebrew that doesn't translate well over into the English. A good source for you to have is you can go online and type in Net Bible N.E.T, all caps. And it's primarily run out of Dallas Seminary. That's one of the few things they do right now. And it's a open manuscript. And I wrote an article for it years ago about the argumentation of a certain word. Who cares? But what it does is scholars all around the world get to look at certain issues or certain text critical problems and write articles as to how it should and ought to be translated and things like that. And if you go look over there, it gives an insight behind a lot of the ways we would translate English. And the reason being is I'll read a section here in a little bit. The ESV cleans it up. The Net Bible kind of lays it out there for what he's saying. And so notice what he begins. He says, I said in my heart. Again, the heart to the Hebrew mind is not the emotion. I know. For us, we just know deep down in our heart. When we're talking about the emotive side of the human being. The Hebrews, they are not. They're talking about the totality of man, primarily his mental capacity. Why? We got to understand, they don't do a lot of open heart surgery, and they don't do a lot of cranial explorations at that day and age. So do they know what your brain's, well, they might but due to warfare, but typically the average person wouldn't, and they wouldn't know what your heart is. And so they're going to ascribe the thing that beats in your chest as the central part that drives the body. That's essentially what they're saying. The essence of your being, your mental faculties, your mental capacity. I searched with all of my being. I said to all of my being, come now. I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this is also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad. And of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guiding me with wisdom. Weird statement. And how to lay hold on to folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. Weird sentences. I said to all of my being. So he's having an internal dialogue with himself. The reader gets to come along for the ride. I said to all of my being, I will test you with pleasure. What do you think he means by the word pleasure? For some of us, we will apply our shifting standard. Well, pleasure is he went to and he went to see a beautiful sunset, and it was pleasurable. Maybe. No. Maybe he went to have a good meal. And see, our culture today is driven as a pleasure-based culture. Talk to young adults. You're having, what is the phrase now for young families that don't have kids? Dinks. Dual income, no kids. We're dinks. When I first heard it, I went going, hey, no, we don't call people that. No, that's a slur about age. No. Dual income. No kids. The reason why they're dual income and no kids, they want to travel and see the world. They want to see it before they get old. Because their whole question, they asked a similar question as Solomon, but they've developed the wrong answer. I don't want to wait till I'm old and then go and retire and then go see these things. I want to see them while I'm young. Still, the answer is I want pleasure for the sake of pleasure. Here's the problem with the dink mindset. Guess what all cultures need to survive? Don't need retirement. What do all cultures need to survive? You must have something. What was it? You must have children. The Italians have a negative birth rate. which means there are less kids being born than there are Italians alive right now. And since they tax their people 54% of their income, soon that nation is going to collapse because they don't have enough kids. America's in the same boat. Why? Because you have people pursuing pleasure. Because the end goal, the end state is pleasure. And we get this from Greek philosophy. This is one of the arguments that Aristotle makes, is that we do things because it brings us pleasure. And our ethics should bring us pleasure. All this comes to us out of Greek philosophy. The problem is it's a perversion of really Greek philosophy. The Roman Empire faced the similar problem. Why? Because they had men that weren't getting married, and they were going around and they were having sex with just about anything and everything. And the emperor's like, hey, listen, you are not good patriots or good citizens because you're putting the empire at risk because there are not enough young people to replace the old people. This is for me. It's for my pleasure. Secondly, then we have this weird idea of pleasure. And when it's exemplified. I mentioned Epicureanism. We have a version of Epicureanism today, and we don't realize it. How many of you ever heard of the phrase YOLO? You young people explain to the old people that you're not talking about a chocolate drink that's sold at the store. Someone tell me what YOLO means. You only live once. The implication from that phrase is so you might as well experience as much work as possible? No, they would laugh at you and go, no, it's not about work. The problem is work is actually good for you. I know it sounds weird, but work is actually good for you. Matter of fact, we were never meant to retire. You know how I know that? Go read your Old Testament and see where they retire. They don't. Now, to be fair, they were an agrarian society, and we are a manufacturer. Actually, in our case, we're a consumer society. We used to be a manufacturing society. YOLO, you only live once. So the implication with the YOLO mindset is I might as well go and experience as much as I can about life. Because the end goal of life is to have experience. Solomon does this. And Solomon says it's a vapor. It is meaningless. It has no value. We do that without having to embrace the Epicurean idea. How many of you have embraced the idea, I'm going to work really hard, and then I'm going to retire and do nothing for X number of years? I'm going to go fishing all the time. I'm going to go golfing all the time. My thing is I want 10 acres of land and an earthen rampart in the back to where my bullets don't go in somebody else's yard. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Just sit on the back porch and just blow away targets. Why? Well, because that's what I like to do. And typically in our retirement scenario, the thing that we like doing the most is typically the thing that drives us the most. And yet that is a relatively new concept in the realm of civilization. But because it's our concept, we read that back through history and assume that that's just how the world has always been. And Solomon would look at that concept and say that too is a vapor. Now, why is that a vapor? Well, we all know that in certain economic situations that our retirements can easily be taken away. Bernie Madoff may trick his friends and spend your retirement without you knowing it. And so all that wealth that you have is gone, and now what are you going to do? Whom are you going to rest your hope and future upon? Well, if you haven't made God the center of your life in these times, you certainly aren't going to make him that this way. Because why? When things get better, you're going to jettison him again. Notice what he says. I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Self-gratifying, self-indulgent pleasure. Now, he gives you a hint of how one of the ways in which he gratified himself. Did you pick it up in the text? He owned slaves, female slaves. The word female slaves, before we get to it, is the word concubine. If you read further down, he had concubines. How did Solomon satisfy his pleasure just from the context of this passage? Sex with a lot of women. And he will tell you that it's vapor, that it is chasing after the wind, and that it does not bring ultimate fulfillment. And I'll give you a little story. Back when I was a chaplain in Italy, sorry, I worked for our sponsor. But when I was a chaplain in Italy, I worked as the fund manager, which means I was always at the chapel. So I had 3 soldiers come in, and they had just gotten back with 173rd, and they came. I don't know why they came to tell me their brilliant plan because they were attending the service, but I guess guilt got the better of them. So they came to tell me their brilliant plan. They had arranged with the local strip club to allow themselves to live there on their 30 days of return leave, 24/7, 7 days a week there. And I said, I know that sounds fun for you, but I think you're going to find that it is not the fun you think it is. And I was in my 40s, and they were much younger. They go, yeah, whatever, chaplain. And they went and did it. And 2 of them came back and said, you were right. It was great the first couple of days. But after a while, it just got to be sickening. And it got to be more sickening. And one guy says, I left halfway through. I blew half my leave pay and vacation time because I didn't have a place to stay because I ended up leaving. See, it sounded good in the head. We're going to be in the strip club all the time. We're going to have alcohol flowing all the time. We're going to have women all the time. Da, 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 da. And then after a while, there's something within them that said, this is not proper or right. This is what Solomon is saying. We have a culture today that is so sexualized that you now have children who should not know what certain things are, that knows about these things simply because of an internet search. Which is why a lot of times you see governors now putting on requirements to validate age. Why? Because we have an overly sexualized culture. And ladies, you have been sold the biggest lie of them all, because a lot of you have been told, if you watch these folks that are interviewed, they believe they are empowered by selling their body to the highest bidder. Let's ask Shakira and J-Lo after the Super Bowl halftime. It was an empowering dance. No, sweetheart, there was nothing empowering about that. It was disgusting. I turned you off. But you've been sold that lie that this is what empowers women. No, that's what objectifies women. Solomon tells you this. Notice what he says. I tested myself, I said, enjoy with self-indulgent, self-gratifying pleasure. And he'll tell you, he didn't deny himself anything. And I think he means anything sexually at all. And notice what he says. Behold, it is meaninglessness. It is vapor. You have a culture that recognizes the meaninglessness of this life. But the problem is, they don't want the answer that gives life meaning, which is a holy God, which comes through salvation in Jesus Christ. You have a whole culture. They know that because here's the thing: they reject the message and they rail against it, but then they find their lifestyle and their answers unfulfilling. Read their stuff that they post. They're the most unhappy people in existence while trying to convince you how happy they are. Are you really happy in your life? Oh, yes, I love it. But it's so horrible. Everybody is so mean to one another. Yeah, what's your standard for meanness if you're an atheist? You have no standard for meanness. Why? Meanness requires an objective standard. Since you don't have an objective standard, you can't have a standard for meanness. Meanness is what you and I determine as mean. And if I don't commit to your assessment of that, then my level of meanness and your level of meanness are in contradiction to one another. That's the problem with these worldviews. The YOLO lifestyle, the Epicurean lifestyle, let's eat, drink, and be merry for all made, is a lifestyle that Solomon will tell you has absolutely no meaning or purpose in life. Why? Because it is devoid of the love of a holy God. It is actually, when you look at it, a flaunting and rebellion of the commands of God. Notice what he says. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what is its use? Another way to translate this, I pursued all pleasure until I became a madman for pleasure. I'll give you a great example from Scripture. Nebuchadnezzar walks out upon his terrace. He looks out upon Babylon, the great city, and he utters these words, "Ah, Babylon, the great city, the city which I have made." And the Lord struck him as a madman. This is why a lot of people think that some of these texts are written post-exile, because this would be something that connects to the post-exilic party, because that's an instance where a man with seeking pleasure was driven mad. And for 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar ate grass like a wild animal. I said of pleasure, I've said of these things, it is like becoming a madman. And what use is the pursuit of pleasure if there's no standard for pleasure, if there's no God? Secondly, what pleases a holy God and what pleases a sinful man are two different standards. What pleases a sinful man is degrading self-gratification. What pleases a holy God is obedience to the commands of God. And those two worlds can't coexist within the church, and yet we try every Sunday. We have people that want just a little bit of Jesus and a whole lot of sin. And folks, none of us are immune to that. Let's just be honest. None of us are immune to that. We all have secret sins or secret pleasures that we all typically indulge in. Some of it is overeating. Some of it is go down the litany of the list. But the difference between those groups is one is heartbroken over the sin and the other one just wants the sin to go away. What use is it? The Net Bible says, I said of partying, which is what he's talking about, it is folly and a self-indulgent pleasure that accomplishes nothing. Why is that? Because once you're done having pleasure, the pleasure is gone. And the only way to have the feeling of that effect is that you must experience that same pleasure. The problem with our pleasure sensory reactors is that you can't just simply have the same pleasure over and over and over again. You eventually cook that out. So what you have to do is experience a greater amount of pleasure each time. So you have to indulge more and indulge more and indulge more and indulge more and indulge more. Which is why if you see people that are addicted to pornography, they start here in a very low status. But over time, unchecked, they eventually embrace all forms. Why? Because to get that hit, to get that buzz, to get that feeling of pleasure, they have to embrace more and more and more and more. Same with alcohol, same with drugs, same with anything. Why? Because pleasure is designed to feed the sensory node of the body. And it's vapor. It's transitory. In a world with a holy God, it has absolutely no meaning and or purpose. So the dink lifestyle is absolutely against and counter to the will of a holy God. Why? Because the task of the reason why you get married is to have children. That's why. Work is not simply for your retirement, but is good for the body. Why? Just because as I work my muscles, I get stronger. As I work at work, I learn more things. I'm able to do more things. I'm able to support more things. And here's the thing is, I should carry that over into my Christian walk, that I constantly am working in my life to conform myself to that will of a holy God. Pleasure requires no work. That's what makes it pleasurable. I searched my heart and how to cheer my body with wine. In phraseology, I pursued it under the sun. Here's the thing is, he drank to get drunk. When I was in high school, I hung out with a rougher set of kids. And they drank. I didn't at the time. And I guess their selling point, they needed to work on being selling the idea of drinking to get drunk. Because on Monday morning, they would come to me and go, man, you missed the party on Friday or Saturday night. I drank so much. I got so drunk, I threw up, and then I had a headache all day Sunday. Okay, I want to help you out. If you're going to sell me on the pleasure of something, throwing up is not in my wheelhouse. You will never hear me say, man, I threw up 4 times yesterday and I felt good. Now, if I was sick and you feel better because, yeah, okay, that's natural. But I don't throw up for fun. I've never considered throwing up fun. And I hate headaches. I've never sat and go, you know what I need right now? I need a headache. So when they tried to sell me on the issue of partying, headaches and throwing up was their selling points. I looked at him and went, seems to me like I didn't miss anything. Now, if you sold me with what Solomon said in the earlier part, like, oh, okay, that might interest me. But the throwing up and headache thing, not so much. Was that fun for you? Oh, yeah. Interesting. Well, I was so drunk I didn't know I was throwing up or had a headache. I said, even more interesting. Weird that you wouldn't remember throwing up, but now you do. Interesting. Yeah, that was the selling point. I searched with my full body to indulge in wine. I consumed every lineage, every line, every beverage. And the word wine here doesn't simply just mean wine with grape juice. You know, you could also have strong drink. You could have beer. You could have anything. Basically, what he's saying is anything that ferments. It's not hard to make things that ferment. Just watch moonshiners. Look, if a guy by the name of Tickle, okay, and Digger can figure out how to put corn, sugar, and yeast into a pot, bring it to a boil, and let it sit for a couple of days, and then cook it, if they can figure that out, so can you. It's not hard. It's basic chemistry. But he did not limit his intake. He drank to drink to drink to drink. And notice what he says. And yet my heart was still guiding me with wisdom. That's a bit of an odd statement because here's the thing is, when you drink to get drunk, are you capable of having your mind in its right cognition? No. The emphasis is, I'm still using my mind to push in this area for the pleasure under the sun. And notice what's said. And how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I pursued this, seeing that in the short time you have on the earth, was this valid? Were these valid pursuits in the short time you have on the earth? And for some of you go, short time? I've been on the earth X number of years. I'm going to help you out. In the scope of eternity, those are a blip. We are so concerned about the 80, 90, 100 years we have in our lives today with enjoying ourselves and having pleasure that we are totally unconcerned about the oblivion and infinity in the days afterwards. We think these days matter more than the days of infinity afterwards. These days determine where you spend affinity. And some of us are so focused on the pleasure seeking, regardless of what it is, than they are about obedience to the commands of a holy God. And more importantly, were they not to know the Son of God, Jesus Christ, and his life-altering words. And we think we can have both, and that's cultural Christianity. You'll see this in cultural Christianity. We used to call them Saturday night sinners and Sunday morning, y'all don't know that, saints? Yeah? Saturday night sinners, Sunday morning saints. It is folly for the few days of your life, so that much of your life is set on the pursuit. Now, he's not saying that pleasure is wrong. He's not saying that having a good meal is wrong. He's not saying that that pursuing good and pleasurable things are wrong. He's not saying that at all. What he's talking about is the absolute pursuit of those things over the pursuit of a holy God. Doesn't mean we have to go home and eat gruel and go, I'm suffering for Jesus. No, listen, I like my bone-in ribeyes. I like my vacation time. I like watching a good sunset. But if that's the end goal of my life, it is meaningless. Notice what he says next. I made great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself. Well, if you're going to drink, you're going to need a source. I made myself gardens and parks, and I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made for myself pools from which water for the forest of growing trees. Notice what he says repeatedly. I made. I built. I did. The reflection of a heart that is very I-centered. And he's going to tell you that I-centered nature for self-indulgent pleasure is meaningless. I made great works. It's part of great building projects. I built houses. Now here's the thing is, building a house today takes time, but nowhere near the time as it does in the ancient Near Eastern world, because the primary media today is usually wood in America. Over in Europe, it's concrete and granite. No joke. Our neighbors, we were down in San Antonio, we were sitting talking to them. We still remember the fact that they had a red granite floor in their garage. Their garage floor was made of red granite that many of you will pay a premium for to put in your house. You know why? Because the quarry was like 10 miles down the road, and guess what the Italians have more of than anything in the world besides Italians? Granite. It was a very cheap building thing there. We had granite stairs. We must not have been the rich family, because we had tile garage floor, but that's okay. Tile garage floor. Tile garage. Think about weird. We had granite stairs. We had granite flooring. It was nice. It didn't feel too good when you bounce your head on it. Just ask my girls. But anyhow, it was a common media. In America, it doesn't take long to build a house. Why? Our primary building media is wood. In the ancient Near Eastern world, you know what their primary building media is? Stone. I don't know if you've ever hammered on a stone before. Tink, 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 tink. Okay, that piece of it. It's a hard media to work with. It takes a while to build, which means it requires people. And where does Solomon get the people? Oh, he's going to tell you where he got the people. And it's not a pleasurable thing for those people. But it brought him pleasure. See, all these building projects have to have a manpower. I built houses. I planted vineyards. Not for you, but for me. Vineyards produce wine, and usually lots of them. I made myself gardens and parks, and I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. For who? Was he doing it out of social charity and Christian kindness? Was it a communal garden? It was his garden. And it was his fruit. And if it fell on the ground and rot, that's okay because it was his. I planted it for myself. See the selfish nature of the pursuit of pleasure for the sake of pleasure. It's a selfish endeavor. You don't believe me? Watch someone caught up in that cycle. It's incredibly selfish. I made pools. Not for people to have drinking water, for the city to have clean water for them to drink. Nope. To which to water my forests and trees to bring me what? Pleasure. All of this is self-serving. All of this is self-seeking. None of this is to aid his fellow man, his family. None of it is all for me. That's why the dink lifestyle, the YOLO lifestyle, has a very selfish notion to it. Listen, I understand wanting to experience things. And for many of you who don't know this, I've had multiple different things and multiple different careers within my... I used to do a lot of mountain climbing and mountaineering. You know what fixes you from wanting to do mountain climbing? It's fall. Fall 40 feet on a 200-foot drop. Your days of mountain climbing pretty much come to an end right about that point because you are instantaneously aware of the fragility of your life. Because when you hit the bottom, you look like raspberry jam. You are fully aware of how fragile the human being is. Why? Because when you fall, you're going to stop, and you're going to stop very rapidly, and then you're right into the face of the rock. It's not fun. Pretty much ended my climbing thing. I still have all my ropes and all my gear. People go, why don't you go climbing? I go, nope. I almost died once. I'm not attempting that again. Well, you only live. Yep, you're right. You only live once, and I'm not doing it on the side of a mountain. I used to be really stupid. I would unhook about 200 feet off the ground, which means I would free climb. You know what free climbing means? There's nothing holding you to the rock face other than these and these. So if you do fall, guess what you become? Raspberry jam at the base of the mountain. After that fall, kind of went, nope, not for me. Why is that? Well, because you're introduced to the frailty of human condition. The only live once mindset is, nope, I will live how I want. I will live how I want. No. Notice what he says. I built all these things for me. Well, how did he build them? Well, he's going to tell you, and he's going to brag about it. I built male and female slaves. And I had slaves who were born in my house. I had so great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any other who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of men. How did you build all these great things? Well, I'm glad you asked. I bought slaves. For my pleasure, I enslaved other men. And that's what the word means. It doesn't mean servants. We clean it up in English. We really do. And this has a lot to do with the English movement, or the anti-slavery movement in England, because the word slave is in your text, and we must deal with that word and understand the purpose of that. But in this case, it is not in a negative light, or in a positive light. For all the gardens and all the buildings that I built, I had to have a workforce to do it. And guess what that workforce was? It was slaves. And not only did I enslave men and buy them, I also enslaved their children. So for those that have been taught that the American slavery model is the only slavery model of its kind in existence, have not read the book of Ecclesiastes, because Solomon did the same thing. Solomon goes one step further in his perversion. Female slaves. That word female slaves is female concubine slaves. Sex slaves. That's what he bought. The wisest man in the world. And we go, oh, this is disgusting. I know. Do the translation for it during the week. You kind of get the ick. I bought men and worked them like dogs in my building projects, and I bought women and used them for my pleasure and gratification. And then I enslaved their children, both sons and daughters, and did the same thing again. Now, it brought Solomon a great deal of pleasure. Here's the thing about the pleasure lifestyle. You benefit. Everyone else deals with the trash. Now, you can get away with this in a world in which there is no objective, biblical, godly standard. But in a world where there is a godly standard, in a world in which God exists, the moral and ethical code tells us that we don't enslave our brothers and sisters, and we don't treat women in the way in which we wouldn't want our family treated. And we don't misuse people and treat them. And here's the thing is, he's going to tie the children in Hebrew to that of the herd animals. And that's horrific. Notice what he says here. Who were born in my house, and all their children, and I had great herds and flocks. So these people were one tier above. I want you to think about this. The wisest man to exist within the world. We extol his great wisdom and virtue. And here he is confessing his sin before you. I owned people, I owned women, I treated them like this way, I owned their children, and they were nothing more to me than like herds and flocks. Basically, the way you would translate this word herd and flock is large cattle and small cattle. We know that there's no such thing as large cattle and small cattle. That's why we break it down in English into sheep and goats and all the other stuff, blah, blah, blah. But Hebrew just makes a distinction between large cattle and small cattle, and the translators break it down to herds and flocks. So one tier above herds and flocks is where these people were. That's the debased nature of pleasure seeking. And you can get away with that in a world in which you deny that there is a God. And you deny that there's not an objective standard. If you look at all the abolition movements all around the world, guess which group pushed every single one of them? They were all Christian-led. Every abolitionist movement around the world. Matter of fact, the English abolitionary movement was led, I forget his name. They made a movie about it. So the title of the movie is called Amazing Grace. William Wilberforce. Matter of fact, so much was that movement that the English crown put a navy to sea off the coast of Africa to capture slaver ships and return the people back to Africa and sink the ship. That was England's commitment to it. Took a while, but longer for us in America to get there. But they were all pushed by Christians. Why? Because Christianity recognizes that everyone is born in the image of God, which is why we don't murder them in the womb, and it's why we don't enslave them as people. And Solomon is telling you what a base nature is. It simply doesn't start with pleasure. That pleasure consumes, and it continues to consume until it begins not just consuming things, but consumes people. And if you've ever watched someone trapped in a deep, 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 deep addiction, they begin consuming people. I also gather for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and providences. At the time in which Solomon is ruling, his father has extended the borders of Israel beyond just simply the Palestine area that we are aware of today. All of the city nation states around Israel pay them homage, and they are all vassal states of Israel. Why? Because David was a fierce and great warrior. And so Solomon had people bringing him and giving him taxes and gifts. I had all the gold and silver. Essentially, I had more money than I could spend. Now, some of us in this room do not pursue the physical pleasures of sexuality or alcohol, but man, do we push and pursue that almighty dollar. I pursued money. And he's going to have some very, very interesting statements about money. And the king promises, I also, with that money, I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the Son of Man. So the concubines, were they ugly? Not according to this text. They were the delight of sons of men. Now, what did he buy the concubines for? Male singers. The singers that he bought were not for worship in the temple. So he didn't buy them to where the temple had great singers and a great praise band and it was awesome worship. He was bringing in Metallica to play his house. If you listen to that stuff. For some of you, it's Barry Manilow. Delight, right? Air Supply. Barbra Streisand? Oh, gosh. I used to work at Kroger, and I worked a 12-hour shift, and the music lasted for 4 hours, which means there were like 6 Barbra Streisand songs. 4 times a night, 5 nights a week, for 2 straight years. I cannot stand Barbra Streisand. You want to break me and make me give up military secrets, you just play Barbra Streisand, I'll break in a heartbeat. I'll tell you, just turn her off. Turn her off, please. I can't take it anymore. I'll break in a heartbeat. He didn't buy the singers to enhance worship. He bought the singers to enhance his pleasure. I bought all this. I did all this. And notice what he's going to say. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in my toil. Now he starts to tell you what pleasure is becoming. And this was my reward for all my toil. And then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil that I had expended in doing it. And behold, it was all vanity and striving after the wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. I amassed more pleasure, more wealth, more slaves, more land, more buildings, more. And you hear the language. More than anyone before me. We've got to understand, David amassed an enormous amount of wealth, but not for his pleasure. David was forbidden to build the temple because David was a man of war and spilled blood. And God said, you're not allowed to build the temple. So David brought in riches from all over the world and stockpiled it for his son to build a place of worship. And his son takes his wealth that his father amasses for him to amass more wealth and to pursue pleasure. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Whatever I saw, I took, and I took what I desired. I did not keep it from them. See, that's an unrestrained heart. It is an unrestrained heart. Well, he could get away with it. Why? Well, he's the king. To quote Mel Brooks, it's nice to be the king. You can tell me that movie. Not now, for goodness sakes, not now. I kept my heart from no pleasure. But notice how he changes the language. It stops being pleasure. Notice it stops being pleasure. And this is the great trap of all types of pleasure and addictions. They stop being pleasurable and now become a toil. I kept from my heart. I kept from my entire being no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, labor. Why? Well, because when you become an addict to sexual activity, it now owns you, and you must work to feed it. When you become an addict to alcohol, it now owns you, and you must work to feed it. And to break free of those, if you've ever watched someone break free of those, or from drugs, or from whatever issue, trying to break free is the hardest thing they'll ever do in their lives. Why? Because it has them. Which is why if you have someone that's alcoholic, don't drink in front of them. Why? Because you are going to push them back into that. Which is why when you deal with people that are greedy and consume things, you don't make them the treasurer of your church. Why? Because that leads to problems. When you have people that struggle with pornography, you shouldn't be looking at crap anyway. But don't have it out for them to look at either. Neither way. But no, bad. Why is that? Because what starts off as pleasure, and this is the great lie that the devil tells you, this is the great lie of the YOLO and the ding and the Epicurean lifestyle. What starts off as pleasurable eventually becomes your master. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it. And notice what he says, behold, all is meaninglessness. It's vapor. It's transitory. And then he adds this qualifier. It's like striving after the wind. How many of you ever caught the wind? Now, if you drive a Jeep, you will catch the wind all the time, every time. It's like carrying plywood across a parking lot on a windy day. Be a heavier guy when you're carrying plywood like that, because if you're like small, like Kimmy is, we'll find her in the next county. I'm pretty safe that I'm not coming off the ground. I hear her back there. Sorry, I had Rhett and the other kids last week. But it's vanity. It's like trying to catch the wind. And the imagery is brilliant. When you go to catch the wind, you're chasing after something that can't be caught. Pleasure is something you cannot capture and maintain. It is something that you are in a constant pursuit of. However, the opposite of that is the relationship with the Holy God is something that can be obtained. It is something that can be had by each and every individual that profess faith in Jesus Christ. Why? Because it is something God gives to mankind. Now, is there a pursuit in your Christian walk? Absolutely. You're not supposed to stay an infant in your faith, and you're to grow in your faith. But it's not an abusive nature as pleasure is with the human being. It doesn't take and not give. Solomon writes this from an understanding that there is a God who has a standard, and that when he judges all of this against the standard that God has, he can look at it and say, it has absolutely no value, only destruction. Only destruction. Which is why when you have a culture today that rejects God because there is no value in it, and what they're saying is my pursuit of pleasure, of all the things that I exist, are more valuable to me than a God who loves me and cares about me. And this has happened, quite honestly, because the church has lost its way in making disciples. We became so focused on making converts that we were not making disciples. And when you begin to make disciples, disciples make other disciples. And they come along those who struggle with all these addictions and issues and help walk with them through the process of that in a relationship to Jesus Christ, as opposed to, hey, it stinks to be you, you figure it out. And what Solomon is saying to all of us today is the pursuit of wealth. See, we look at the sexual stuff and go, see, oh yeah, that's bad. Okay, the pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of pleasure, the pursuit of retirement, the pursuit of all these things. These things in themselves become a trap into themselves. And they're all meaninglessness in the eyes of a holy God. Why? Because we're all to be about the pursuit of a holy God, which brings pleasure in itself, but not the enslavement pleasure that you have here. You're here today. You've lived a life that is about self-indulgent pleasure and has been a self-seeking nature. Saved, not saved. If you're unsaved, let me help you out. What that means is if you do not know who Jesus Christ is, and you're to die in your trespasses and sins today, you will go to hell. Now, don't make the rules. That's how it is. Well, I don't believe in God. It matters not what you believe in. There is a God. He has a standard. The standard is sin is punishable by death. All of us have sinned, which means all of us are under penalty of death. If that's you, I'd love to sit and talk to you about a gracious God who sent his son into this world to die for your sin so that you could have a restored relationship with him. If you're here today and you have been the nominal Christian where you want a little bit of pleasure and a little bit of God and it will all work out in the end, I'm going to help you out. You'll become a master to one of them, but you can't be a master to both of them. If that's you, I'd love to sit and talk to you about how to get your life back on track with a holy God as the praise team leads us out.